have had pay cuts.
Do you think he's going to distribute that to the players?
No.
Welcome to the December 2nd, 2021 electronic meeting of the Environmental Commission. This meeting is in accordance with executive orders from the governor to effect social distancing and mitigate the spread of the COVID-19 virus. We intend to conduct this meeting similarly to an in-person meeting. However, please be patient if there are technical issues. Public comment will be via telephone only. To speak during any of the public comment opportunities, please call 877-853-5247 or 888-788-0099 and enter meeting ID 997-0393-5320. This information is also available on the published agenda in the public notices section of the city website and on the broadcast of this meeting on CTN channel 16, AT&T channel 99, and online at www.a2gov.org/watchctn. Okay, so Galen, would you like to read the land heritage statement?
Sure. Okay, let's kick it off. I acknowledge that the land the city of Ann Arbor occupies is the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of the Anishinaabe, including the Odawa, Ojibwe, and Bodewodmi and Wyandotte peoples. I further acknowledge that our city stands, like almost all property in the United States, on lands obtained generally in unconscionable ways from indigenous people. The taking of this land was formalized by the Treaty of Detroit in 1807. Knowing where we live, work, study, and recreate does not change the past. But a thorough understanding of the ongoing consequences of this past can empower us in our work to create a future that supports human flourishing and justice for all individuals. And this is the land heritage statement.
Thank you, Galen. Would you like to do the roll call now?
I'm going to check the queue. I think someone's trying to get in. Okay. Commissioner Graham.
Hi, yes, here. Thank you.
Commissioner Needham.
Here.
Councilmember Dish.
Here.
Commissioner Gibb Randall.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Councilmember Griswold. Councilmember Griswold.
He's here.
Looks like she froze up.
Okay. Commissioner Callowart.
Here.
Chairperson Brown.
Present in Ann Arbor.
Vice Chairperson Mitchell.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Vandenbroek.
Here.
Commissioner Oriole.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Zhang.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Juno. Commissioner Juno. All right, we have a quorum.
Thanks, Galen. So let's move on to the approval of the agenda. Has everybody received the latest copy, which just shuffled a few of the order of a few things as previously presented? Is everybody okay? Raise your hand. I see Chris Graham has his hand raised.
I
Chris.
raised it because I was wondering if there was a research paper that the city did to identify the Indian heritage exactly here in Ann Arbor, and if so, could we see it? I presume somebody got to the bottom of who was here and who was camping in Ann's Arbor, which I think was an Indian camp down between State Street and the Allen's Creek. I'd sure like to see it if something was done. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Rita.
I did speak briefly with to Missy about this, and she said that she wrote it. So I think we should find out from Missy Stoltz the source of that information.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. That's consistent with everything I've heard from other sources. So it would surprise me if it was very different. Any questions about the agenda, Lisa?
Yeah, it's in a funny order now, or at least the one that I have. The refutation of false claims about deer management is under solid waste challenges and strategy from staff's perspective. Mm-hmm. No, on yours, John, it's not.
The most recent one that came from Galen earlier today.
Okay, I took mine from the, thank you. I took mine from the public. Thanks, John.
Yeah, we have two attachments. The were on Legistar for the deer call. And then there's two for solid waste. Okay, Lisa, did you have a further comment? Okay. Are there any suggestions to modify the agenda? Hearing and seeing none, let's vote on it. Whoever agrees to, whoever accepts the agenda as first written, raise their hand or say aye.
The latest version, aye, yeah.
Sorry?
The latest version, aye, yes.
Yeah, the latest version. Any nays? Raise your hand or say nay. Any abstentions? Okay, the latest agenda passes unanimously. Next, we'll move to the approval of the minutes of the October 28th meeting. Hope everybody's had a chance to look over the minutes. City staff has decided to, after a temporary experiment, making them, populating them with more detail, it's been decided that we would go back to the traditional means of just, mentioning what topics were discussed. And what had happened, because anybody can refer back to the video recordings if they want to know exactly what happened. Okay, so are there any questions or any discussion? Do I have a motion for discussion of the minutes? Okay, I hear and see none. So let's vote on it. Whoever approves the minutes as the draft minutes as presented, here on Legistar, raise your hands or say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing and seeing none. Any abstentions? I hear and see none. So the minutes as posted on Legistar pass unanimously. So let's move on to public commentary. This is an opportunity for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes. Please call 1-888-788-0099 and enter meeting ID 997 0393-5320. This information is also displayed on the meeting agenda and the video feed. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand one by one using the last 3 digits of your phone number. In order to electronically raise your hand to indicate your desire to speak, please press *9 on your phone. You will hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. When speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any television or background sounds so that we may hear you clearly. Please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments, and be patient. There can be a delay of up to 30 seconds before a connection is established. So while we're waiting, is there anybody on the queue yet?
No one with their hand up, but Vice Chairperson Mitchell.
Yes. Rita, I see your hand. Do you want to make a public comment?
Oh, shoot. No. Well, here's my public comment. I'd like to welcome Commissioner Juneau to the meeting. She appeared later and didn't get on our roster. So just
Okay.
we all have her. Welcome.
Yeah, and we have 2 new members. We have Ann Marson on that topic as our representative from the Park Advisory Commission. She's here for the first time. And we have a new solid waste coordinator, I think the title is, here in the city, Sarah Mason, who's here as well. So we'll have you guys introduce yourselves during the committee reports and during the presentation for you, Sarah. Okay, well, let's see. Anybody raise their hand yet, Galen, on the line?
No.
Okay, well, this ends the public commentary period. Let's move on to unfinished business. The first item is the Gelman plume, the status of the MS4 notice of violation. Rita, do you want to?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. This is just a short update. I have had a conversation with Evan Pratt, our County Water Resources Commissioner, and the status is that there hasn't been any change in the plan for the Gelman plume resolution of the 1,4-dioxane infiltration of the Allen Creek drain that goes through town through West Park. He will be contacting the county legal team to address additional comments. There's some confusion about responsibility, and so I have invited him to attend our meeting in January. So I'll expect him then, and we'll have a better update than this that I'm providing. But there is a concern that there's still some 1,4-dioxane flowing there, and that it hasn't been addressed.
Thank you, Rita. Are there any other news about the Gelman plume? If anybody wants to share, just raise your hand. Okay, I hear and see none. So let's move on to the next item, which is the deer management resolution. Chris, you have the floor. Chris Graham.
So I think you all have in your hands a couple of documents that I'm presenting this evening, hopefully for your support. One is a full 2-page resolution with a memorandum that precedes it that addresses concerns those of us who have long felt too many deer in Ann Arbor. It's been a very serious problem that we made great progress over the 5 years that we're doing culling. We cannot stop it. We need to go back and keep doing it on a regular basis. And the second document addresses the paper tigers that were thrown up 5 years ago or 6 years ago, suggesting what I call falsehoods about why the course that the city took wasn't a good one. And I'm extremely grateful the city did what it did. My neighborhood probably benefited the most. That was not intentional. It had to do with the fact that the university allowed culling in the Arboretum. And of course, the the golf course here in Hills and the surrounding native forest fragment woodlands near it, parklands, were outstanding locations to call deer, and that made an unbelievable dent in the 100 deer or so that were roaming this neighborhood. We went from being overrun to 4 lovely ladies who were sterilized running around, and the change was unbelievable. However, one of my guys left the gate into my backyard open, and one of those lovely ladies went back there, and I went back there after her and chased her out and came back indoors and found a black-legged deer tick crawling down, full-size female, crawling down my arm, sitting in my drawing studio. I've lived on this property via my family since 1960. I've never had any tick on my body, working outdoors hundreds of thousands of hours in the 60 years. And to find a deer tick immediately after a deer went through my backyard is very alarming. Some of you may have friends who live in Connecticut and Long Island or Wisconsin who have gotten sick from one of the 5 or 6 different bacterial diseases that deer ticks carry. And you probably know some of them have never recovered or have had many, many months of very difficult health problems from the most famous of these bacterium is called Lyme disease. These ticks are now very much in Ann Arbor, and they were not here. When I was a kid, there weren't any deer in Ann Arbor or anywhere near. You'd have to go out in the farm fields well out in the country to find deer. And then not very many, because out there hunters can work with them. But slowly the population has built up in a very amazing success story. And they found very highly nutritious food in the city, all of our wonderful landscape plants. They found cover. They found an area where they cannot be hunted. It's a very difficult problem. It's a very difficult problem to understand what to do with. And there are some people who are, well, I won't, I'll read the document that's been presented to you, second document's been presented to you that make arguments that are very difficult to work with. The most important of them is using rifles to kill animals in the city is dangerous and unacceptable. Generally speaking, I agree. However, the professionals that we hired use a handmade ammunition that breaks apart if it hits a leaf. They use their weapons in restricted areas at night with night vision equipment, with silencers. They use their weapons only where deer come to bait piles that they have put out there, and they are extremely close to those deer. There's absolutely no room for error. A lot of people say, well, why don't you use bows? That would make us feel better. Well, it's very difficult to be certain that you're going to kill a deer with a bow, with an arrow. And if you don't, then you're having to track a deer probably onto private property until you can find it. And that's also not acceptable and would be cause for great alarm. They take one shot the deer falls on the ground. The meat is eaten by food gatherers and distributed. There are people who process the meat at much reduced cost, so it can be given away very inexpensively. And there probably is not a better meat protein to eat than deer. It's extremely lean meat, very low fat. Very good for people if you eat meat. So I'm going to stop spouting. I'm hoping that someone will second the motion here and that we can approve it and request then that the council go back and reconsider its decision to eliminate this work from the budget last spring. I'll put the motion on the table.
Okay, do I have a second? Okay, Brian, Bob Needham seconded. So let's open the floor for discussion. Please raise your hand if you would like to make a comment. Bob Needham.
I just wanted to thank Commissioner Graham for picking up the ball on this after I dropped it somewhat due to some family issues. And I appreciate all the hard work that's gone into the resolution before us tonight. It seems very clear to me, based on what we've heard from Professor Dick and others, that the deer population is currently at a level that's doing serious long-term harm to our ecosystem. And I think the cull is a regrettable necessity at this point. That's what it comes down to for me.
John, you have the floor.
Yeah, thanks. Also want to add my thanks to Chris for putting this together. Just had 2 items on the resolution, one a question and one a friendly suggestion. One of the most compelling things I found was the statute included about the natural area program's impact. And I'm wondering if that can be backed up with any documentation or explanation. I went back to your May 2021 message to council and saw it there, but I was looking for something else just to kind of bolster that fact. So if that can be further explained, how you got to 15 million or referenced with some type of documentation, that would be great. And then in the 4th paragraph that begins, "It is difficult." My suggestion, just to kind of keep people, invite people into this, I would suggest rewriting that to say, in order to better understand how deer browsing can impact Ann Arbor's treasured natural areas, the city hired, and then the data are clear. So just a friendly suggestion on editing that there.
The city passed a millage back in the early 1990s. And it's a very interesting story to tell you that, because it was the very beginnings of protecting natural features in the city. And there were a group of bur oaks growing east of the Veterans Administration Hospital that were placed smack in the way of a relocation of Fuller Road and Oakway that used to go up in the middle of the hospital. And there was a meeting where we got the mayor and most of the council out there to look at these trees, and out of that came an agreement with the university to move the road to the east and save the trees. But also out of that meeting came a recognition, because we looked at the understory under the trees, completely full of very mature buckthorn and amur honeysuckle, that our parks were in big trouble from invasion by invasive shrubs. And from that recognition came leadership from the Sierra Club. Members of that group were at this meeting, who then asked the council to support a millage to start the natural areas program. in the Parks Department, the city. It's that amount of money that has been spent by the people of Ann Arbor through the millage, supporting that program since then, that amounts to 15 million or so. And of course, a lot of the work at clearing invasive species from our parks in order of their importance to our biological diversity has come from volunteers. And Dave Borneman estimated what the number of hours of volunteer help has been over all these 30 years. So these numbers come from the horse's mouth. We've had one leader of the Natural Areas Program since the beginning, Dave Borneman. He's been very special, and I can only quantify that by saying when I first started, and back then, almost no one in Ann Arbor knew about invasive species. Almost no one knew about buckthorn or hammer honeysuckle. And now I don't encounter anybody who does not know about invasive species. Now we have many more. Garlic mustard is very famous.
I appreciate all that. I still think it needs to be clear in the document so that we don't get pushback on it.
Okay.
So thanks, John. So that was a friendly amendment. Chris, are you going to amend the resolution as suggested?
I'm not sure I can write it on the spot, but if you trust me to do so, I will.
Okay. Yeah, before you submit it to Galen.
Right.
Shannon, your name is up. Your hand is up.
I am fully in support of the work that Chris did here, and I would just like to share one anecdote that ties some of these things together that I think is a powerful story, which is I moved into my house that backs up to a ravine that is connected to West Park about 18 years ago. And I have been the park steward for this natural area for that whole time. And there's been a kind of a small group of us that have been working on this area. And we have systematically been, in the beginning, it was garbage and things like that. And we have removed all kinds of invasive species. And part of the joy of doing that is that we introduced sunlight onto the forest floor in this area. And we started getting a really wonderful display of our native woodland wildflowers that came in through here, specifically hundreds and hundreds of bloodroot, which are one of the first wildflowers to bloom in the spring and are extremely important food for overwintering bumblebee queens, because they hibernate and they come out, and that's like their first food. They're not going into the daffodils, the non-native things. They're going into these native wildflowers, and that's probably the first one that comes up. And it was a real joy to see all of this happen and respond with all of the work that the volunteers and I have done over the years. Starting about 4 years ago, they just depleted one year. And we saw deer prints all over, and we are now down to about 4 or 5 bloodroot in an area that had hundreds and hundreds of them all over a hillside. So there really is no way to be able to calculate the impact of what that has on our ecosystems, not just the plants, but all those relationships that happen with the other critters that are part of our systems. And I see this in my work all the time. I can go into a woods and just tell you the deer are just browsing everything, because there's only about 5 native wildflowers that grow, that tolerate the deer. And normally I would see 25 or 30 different species. It really is just having a huge, huge impact on our ecosystems. So it's not just people's hostas in their yards, it's really our natural areas too. So I really urge us to be able to take this next step and try to get this in front of our city council and in front of the people of Ann Arbor again, to be able to really take the bull by the horns and try to make this happen.
So Shannon's probably in a neighborhood where there's not enough room to be safe to call.
Oh, probably not. Yes, it's like right near West Park. I definitely saw a difference in the call in the outer areas, and especially the areas along the river in clients' yards. I'm a landscape architect, and I saw that. I saw a big impact in that way. But there's areas within the city that are a little tight in terms of being able to have the call happen there. But I think all of it makes a big difference, though. I really, truly believe that. So, I know some areas will not benefit as much as others, but I know also that it's not just my little ravine that's important. It's all these other areas around too. So I feel like it's super important to have this call happen.
So I'm hoping that if we have an established program that doesn't go away, that a couple of things will go on. One is that we'll work with surrounding townships from which a lot of deer come into the city and get them on board to doing the management that's needed to slow this whole infiltration process down, which is slow but sure. The second problem is that everything to do with what we do or anybody does with wildlife in Michigan is absolutely controlled 100% by the Wildlife Division of the Department of Natural Resources. And they are, on the whole, I won't say controlled, but led by the interests of hunters. And hunters don't like anybody killing deer if it's not them, for their purposes. I don't think there's any chance that we're ever going to have open hunting in the city. So how do we solve this problem of many parts of the city having an uncontrolled herd of deer? Well, one way would be to allow the people who do this work to shoot them with darts and essentially knock them down with a sedative and then euthanize them. That's anathema so far to the DNR and to hunters. But how do you solve this problem of not wanting to use rifles, but still needing to get deer out of here, or at least down to numbers that are sustainable? Part of the problem about euthanizing the deer is that, part of the issue about darting them is you're using a drug. And at least so far, it is said that the drugs that are used leave the meat unedible. And that's not a good answer either. So we really need to find a way that darts can be used and still have the meat be edible and still get agreement from hunters. And that's a difficult political problem. But I'm hoping the city of Ann Arbor, as it did with sterilization in the first go-round, can lead the way in the state.
All right. Thank you, Chris. And any other comments? Please raise your hand. Rita.
I also support this approach. Again, and I agree with the reluctance on the actual killing aspect of it. But when we think about the many interconnections, and I think that Shannon's description of what she observed firsthand is really a powerful one. And as one of many of us who support pollinators, that's a huge observation. In addition, I know that the studies that were done focused a great deal on oak seedlings and their potential regeneration or browsing by deer. And since oaks are acknowledged to support a lot of insect life that is life for birds and squirrels and other things, the opportunity for us to support the regeneration of any forest is really an important thing. And especially as we move forward in climate change, we know we need to have our forests for carbon sequestration. We need to protect the big trees, but we also have to foster the trees that will follow them. And so that's yet another reason, I think, to support this approach. The initial deer management plan also included some monitoring by air, identifying locations that have the most heavily or are most heavily populated by deer. And I think that can help us move forward. And maybe with the other ideas that Chris mentioned, there are ways to do this that's effective and makes things approach what we want in terms of a balance. And it is a balance that we want. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita. Are there any other questions or comments? I don't see any, so I have one, Chris, and that is that both the county and the university own property within the city limits. So how is this coordinated with the county and the university?
Very closely with the university. They've been very helpful and very cooperative, and have even done better enforcement against people trying to interfere than our own city police have done. The county has not been able to get to it yet. It would be very helpful if something could be done in County Farm Park. There's a big vegetable garden there. There's a very wonderful development whose gardens around this new, really interesting low-income housing project is going to be astonishingly quickly destroyed by deer in County Farm Park. It would be very helpful if they would work with us there and in surrounding county properties. They have many natural areas that are close to the city, and I'm confident they're having at least the problem we are.
Okay, what about, what about Concordia College?
There's a very large deer population in Marshall Park and along the river east of town. And it would be very helpful if they would allow activity on that property away from the buildings.
Chris, has there been any connection with Barton Village?
Not a cooperative connection, but Barton did the first culling beginning in the 90s. The DNR gave them a permit for about 100 deer a year. They did a study prior to being granted that permit to see how many deer were coming and going through Barton Hills, and it was 450 through the property. It's about 2 square miles. The Forest Preserves in Chicago did a study of the carrying capacity of deer in order to have 1 foot tall trillium, which is pretty healthy trillium, 12 deer a square mile. Barton Hills got between 60 and 100 deer out of there every year for more than a decade. Trillium are beginning to come back to Barton Hills. There were, when I was young, great rafts of it out there, and they had all disappeared. And now we're back in the same soup. There was a whole new set of board members and a whole new set of owners out there that are much younger with kids, and so a lot of concerns, and Wilder Ash was getting old, and so they stopped. Now it's back on again, and they're slowly ramping up the number of deer they can take each year. That was the first place I saw deer in or near the city, in Barton Hills, about 1975.
Well, as I recall, the home range of female deer is something like 2 miles.
Probably less than that. probably a neighborhood. They don't go very far and their kids stay close. It's the bucks that go 2 miles or 3 miles or all the way to Long Island where all the bucks are sterile because there are a lot of fertile girls up there. Sorry, that's a joke. I probably should explain. New York is spending millions to sterilize the bucks on Staten Island, which is an interesting approach.
Yeah. So I only have one more thing to add, and that is that, I mean, I personally have a good friend who lives in New York and whose face was paralyzed for 6 months because of Lyme disease. And I've worked with a young woman who was paralyzed probably for life from the waist down from Lyme disease. And I spent a lot of time in the woods, and this summer though, walking through the Arb, I have found deer ticks on me after going through the pathways in the Arb. So I think we ought to all be mindful of that as well. So
the baby deer ticks are about the size of a pinhead. They can jump from a plant onto your pant leg, and they can carry the bacterium.
Yeah, I recognize them, the black-legged ones, Exotides. And they, what startled me is whenever I find one, I always find a couple more.
Yep, you go through a patch of them.
Yeah. So this is another public health concern.
I've been saying that's the biggest concern all along, although I'm, as you know, very married to protecting natural features in Ann Arbor and really restoring them. And we've suffered terrific damage already. And we've spent all this money and time clearing the invasive shrubs away and letting more light on the forest floor. So what was once a very rich wildflower flora on the forest floor can come back, and then the deer are eating it.
All right. Well, thank you. Are there any other comments people would like to make? So let's end the discussion and move to a vote. Do I have a motion to vote? Anybody? Lisa, is there a second? Yeah. Okay, Rita. So all who approve of this resolution requesting a deer call be reinstated for the city, please raise your hand or say aye.
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 Aye. Any nays? I see and hear none. Any abstentions? I see and hear none. So the resolution to be amended, as discussed earlier, passed unanimously. So thank you, Chris and Bob.
Thank you all very much.
I
continue to be available to answer questions from any commissioners that wonder about things. We started in on this 6 or 7 years ago, and the understanding and knowledge is deep.
Okay, so let's move on to new business. The first item is the quarterly solid waste fund report. Let's see, who wants to take that? Molly, Sarah?
Excuse me, Chris. I see a hand from Kathy Griswold.
Oh, Kathy, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Hi, I was having audio problems previously. I just wanted to say I'm calling in from Lake Tahoe.
Holy mackerels.
Okay.
Got some skis out there?
No, but I'm watching the sunset.
Very good.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So let's see. Okay, so Molly, do you want to present the solid waste? Just give us the bottom line.
I think maybe I'm a little confused on the agenda. I apologize. I really want to be for them to provide all of the updates. Will be acceptable to the commission?
Oh, I'm sorry, you're breaking up quite a bit, Molly. I couldn't understand you.
I video.
Your video's frozen and your voice is breaking up.
Can you
Do you want to try one more
can
time,
you hear
Molly?
me?
A little bit.
Can you hear me now?
No, you're still breaking up.
If it's all right, and Molly, if you're hearing this, please step in if your audio comes back through. But I can step in because I believe I understand what Molly where she was headed with this. As we talked about the agenda previously, the solid waste report, the fund report that was provided as a communication item. You have that in your agenda materials. And what we had hoped to go into is Molly was going to cover an introduction for Sarah Mason, for myself, for those of you who I've not met before. I think in the interest of keeping the meeting moving, and I hope, if Molly joins back in, she can interject and redirect us if needed. But I'll say, for myself, I'm Kayla Coleman. I'm a community engagement specialist with the City of Ann Arbor. And I have been helping out in the solid waste world over the last few months with the departure of the previous resource recovery manager. I helped to fill that gap while we were working to find Sarah Mason and bring her on board as the new resource recovery manager. And I'll have some continuing involvement in solid waste programs for the time being. So I've been asked to join your meeting tonight and help with covering some of the updates and updates for solid waste. It looks like Molly's back in. So let's see. Do you want to try it again, Molly?
I can. I don't know if anybody can hear me now.
We can.
Yeah,
Better?
it's good.
I am not Tahoe savvy. I'm just right at home and I have apparently poor service. So I don't know. But Kayla, it sounds actually I heard everything said. Take it over, I guess, from here.
All right. Thanks, Molly. So I had just introduced myself and I was going to turn it over to Sarah. Perhaps if you want to introduce yourself. As I said, Sarah is our new resource recovery manager. We welcome her and are excited to have her. So Sarah, please feel free to introduce yourself.
Hey, thank you, Kayla. Good evening, everyone. I've met a couple of you. I'm excited to be here and meet everybody else. As Kayla mentioned, I'm Sarah Mason. I'm the new resource recovery manager with the city. Started a few weeks ago remotely from Houston, Texas, and then I moved up here just the weekend before Thanksgiving. So just in time for snow, which is a nice welcome to the north. I am coming to you. I worked for the city of Houston for 15 years doing local environmental programming. Had the opportunity to touch on a few different things, urban forestry and air quality, but spent the bulk of my career doing waste reduction and recycling programs. Spent the last 12 years with the Houston Solid Waste Management Department. And my last role there was as the recycling manager, managing our drop-off operations and doing contract administration for our recycling and diversion program. So I have a lot of knowledge about solid waste and recycling generally, but I am new to Ann Arbor and new to the programs here. So it's been great. Kayla's been a really excellent resource on getting me up to speed, and it's been nice to meet the team and get started. So just excited to be here.
Well, welcome to Ann Arbor.
Thank you, Sarah, for providing that introduction. And the next, where we plan to head from here was, I'll cover some of the challenges, talk a little bit about what the solid waste program area has been experiencing, both recently over the last few months that I've been involved in this area, and longer term challenges, as well as some updates on current initiatives that Sarah and I will speak briefly about together, and then hand it over to Jenny for a circular economy discussion and time for question and answers following that. So if that sounds all right, I'm going to go ahead and jump in to some challenges. So one that I wanted to highlight is, of course, staffing shortages. This is not unique to Ann Arbor or to solid waste. It's obviously a nationwide challenge, and it certainly has affected us. We've seen turnover both on the side of administration and programming, as well as operations. With the vacancy for the resource recovery manager being one of those turnover positions, but also we currently have an intern position that we're trying to hire for, and trying to hire for a new contract compliance specialist. So with all of the shortages and outages of staffing, some that have been short-term, some that are longer term, it certainly creates strain on the existing staff to keep up with all of the competing demands. And then also just the transition process of bringing new people on board and up to speed. I experienced that myself during the solid waste group back at the end of August. And I think Sarah's gone through that herself in the last few weeks, getting acclimated to a new area. Another challenge I just wanted to highlight are all of the contract changes we've experienced. The timelines for many of our major solid waste contracts have come up for renewal or have expired within a pretty short time frame. Contract scoping and negotiations can be a pretty lengthy process, especially when you add on some stakeholder engagement leading up to that to help scope out and vision for a new contract. So all of those are time consuming. The timing such that they happened in quick succession has certainly been a strain again on resources. And even once a contract is adopted, there's usually an adjustment period where both the staff and the contractor is getting adjusted to new things like changes to invoicing or reporting or other practices. And we've certainly seen the pull on us for that. Service limitations and ongoing service issues with particular properties or pickups is a concern in the solid waste area that is very familiar and is near and dear to hearts of anyone who's worked in this area. Collection timing and frequency can be challenging, and some of that is governed by the contracts that we currently operate within. And there's opportunity to make improvements with new contracts coming up, such as with commercial franchise contract update. We hope to tackle some of those, but we're also looking at midterm or near-term solutions. So in relation to service frequency and timing of service, I wanted to note the work that staff did to negotiate Sunday service for the downtown area with waste management. It is now an option that is available, but it does require a minimum buy-in from downtown customers in order for us to achieve that. And we've not yet been able to get enough buy-in to implement that Sunday service, but we think that it could really help with some of the challenges we see. I'll wrap it up. I just got a couple more here on challenges. I wanted to note enforcement. This is an important piece of a multidisciplinary approach to how we can tackle some of our solid waste operation issues. But again, they have their own staffing shortages and limitations. And with the limited number of community standards officers that we have, we also face competing demands for their time. But we have been able to leverage them to help with enforcement for trash on the ground and bulky waste, especially around student move-in at the beginning of the semester and in relation to football Saturdays. Finally, last one on challenges is just to note it's a fall leaf collection and compost heavy season. And that, of course, presents challenges with the fall leaf pickup. Sometimes there are properties that may have upward of 100 bags of leaves on the curb at one time. And when service trucks come through and get entirely loaded down from a single parcel, it really presents challenges for us to continue to deliver continuous service across all parcels of the city. So trying to space out when bags get put on the curb can really help. And then something we can't really control for, but just to know that it's a challenge is with our changing climate, seeing things like the snow that we got earlier this week and having compost bags in the snowbanks, and then seeing weather like today with snow melt and ending up with heavy wet bags of leaves. All of those create a lot of challenges for staff. So this is just sort of to paint the picture of the reality that we're working within, but also to move on to some of the updates and initiatives that we're working on, I'm going to talk about one that I've been heavily involved with, and then I'll turn it over to Sarah here in a moment. But in terms of updates, we're working heavily on our education contract. So many of you may likely know that the city has in the past contracted with the Ecology Center for educational programming to K-12 students. And with the expiration of that contract, we've been looking more broadly at what our education needs are for community-wide, to have a community-wide impact on education, and looking beyond K-12 students, but what else could we do with marketing, outreach, engagement, and other forms of education? So that's been, again, a very resource-intense process. We scheduled a series of stakeholder engagement sessions. We had the pleasure of talking with Councilmember Dish and Commissioner Callawort as part of that process, representatives from the Zero Waste Working Group. So thank you both for participating in that process. We also spoke with service providers, some of our folks from waste management, We Care, Recycling Ann Arbor, as well as representatives from Ann Arbor Public Schools, so we could get a firsthand response from educators in the classrooms. Other internal operations, so thinking of customer service, enforcement, public works, what are they seeing and hearing, and trying to really think broadly about what our needs are for education, what priority messages and priority audiences do we need to reach. So we are now in discussions with the Ecology Center, working to develop a scope for that, and we do hope to have a contract in place possibly by this spring, and if not that, then for the start of the 2022 school year. So I'm going to now hand it over to Sarah to cover a couple of other updates. So on to you, Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you, Kayla. Yes, just a couple of other items to provide you an update on. One is the commercial franchise contract in downtown service area. Kayla mentioned this a bit, and the challenges and some of the things that we're trying to address. The solid waste resource management plan had recommended improvements to that service area, especially in downtown, and the city's current commercial franchise contract was extended, but it does expire in June 2023. And so we're beginning now to engage stakeholders, particularly the downtown district and others, to work on developing an RFP to get a new contract in place prior to the expiration of the current contract. And in that new RFP, we're looking to emphasize like improved vendor communication, service options, service timing, and reporting options. And so due to this, the complexity of this contract, we want to go ahead and get started now so that we have time to do that stakeholder engagement and make sure we've got the feedback we need to compile a scope of work that's going to address some of the issues that we've had ongoing. And this had intended, I think, to be started a little bit earlier this fall. However, because of some of the staff turnover and other challenges that we've talked about, we had a little bit of a delayed start, but we're looking to start that stakeholder engagement either later this month or early in the new year. And then the other update that I wanted to give was around year-round compost collection. I know that this is something that's been of big interest, that was also mentioned in the plan, that was also mentioned in the previous comprehensive organics management plan. So we're excited to share that we are going to be doing that as a soft launch this year. We'll be doing a monthly collection for January, February, and March. And we're taking this opportunity to kind of learn about doing that organics collection during the winter months. It will be in the carts only. So because of the issues with picking up leaves and bundles of branches in the winter weather, we'll just be doing the cart collection. And so that will start in January, and we'll have a little bit more information to come, the specific details on the schedule and some recommended like things that you need to do to put your food in the cart to keep it from basically freezing to the side of the cart so that the collection will still be efficient. And yes, I think that was everything I had to share. So up next in our presentation will be Jenny to share an update on our presentation on the circular economy paper.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jenny Petoskey. I'm the Solid Waste Outreach and Compliance Specialist. I'm going to share my screen. Kaylin, you gotta let me do it. Should be good. All right. So back in May 2020, the online journal Sustainability approached Dr. Stoltz about contributing to a special issue around the circular economy and cities. Dr. Stoltz reached out to Public Works, and management and staff decided that we did want to work on collaborating to write a paper together. So we wrote this paper, Envisioning a Circular Economy, the journey of one mid-sized Midwestern city. And you can see all the contributors there. Galen, myself, Missy, our former resource recovery manager, Eileen Naples, and then a lot of interns and a equity fellow as well. So why did we want to write this paper? We thought it would be a good way to generate interest around this really amorphous idea of what is the circular economy. We thought it would also build and better cement the partnership between the Office of Sustainability and Innovation and the Department of Public Works. And we got a lot of things out of this. You know, first of all, we're published. This is a published paper. So that was really awesome. We also started, we were able to showcase the things that we've already done in the city of Ann Arbor, because we've done a lot in this realm. And we're also able to start generating a lot of momentum around what is circular economy. And it also set us up for grant funding, which I'll talk about. It set us up to do recruitment. I don't know if this is true, but I hope it's part of what brought Sarah here. So I want to talk about what the circular economy is. I can't see you all, but if you'd raise your hand if you know what the circular economy is, like your physical hand, I would appreciate that. Okay, I see a few of you, you know what it is. So thank you. So basically, the circular economy is the idea of moving back towards a culture that is regenerative. This is, if you knew anybody who was around during the Great Depression, they saved everything because things had value. Our throwaway culture has really only been around since after World War II. So we want to move back towards that culture where things have value. And you can see this pyramid here has some ideas of how we use our resources and the best ways to use our resources and the least best ways to use our resources. So removing the need for that resource is the best way to deal with that resource. So if you think about like the strawless campaign, did you do the strawless campaign? If you did, you removed the need for that resource. And then reducing, this is like thinking of things like printing on both sides of your paper. So you reduce the need for paper. Resourcing, this is changing our source of things. So this is moving from fossil fuels to renewable energy. Reuse, you're using something in the same flow. So this might be, I'm getting rid of a cabinet in my house and I'm gonna put it in my garage for use. So not reusing it. And then down here, we get to recycle. So recycle is not the best use. We have all these other uses of our resources that are better. And a real key here is redesign. We have to think about these things from the beginning. Thinking about our waste from the back end as waste is not beneficial. We need to start thinking about how we design these things out. So our paper, we know that there's all these practices out there regarding circular economy. There's some in the United States, there's a lot more in Europe. We know that there's this theory that there's all these people writing about the circular economy. And we really wanted to look at both of these and pull them in and see what the city of Ann Arbor could potentially do in this realm. So for the purpose of this paper, we use the Ellen MacArthur Foundation definition. They're a very big organization in this realm. So a circular economy aims to redefine growth, focusing on positive society-wide benefits. It entails decoupling economic activity from the consumption of finite resources and designing waste out of the system. Underpinned by a transition to renewable energy sources, the circular model builds economic, natural, and social capital. So when we were thinking about the circular economy, we saw all these different things that we could do, and we wanted to provide some kind of categorization. So we used this classification system from Dr. Stoltz's previous research. And we said you need to have actions from all 12 of these categories in order to have a successful cultural shift from a consumptive economy to one that is circular. And the next parts of this presentation are going to talk about most of these categories. Collaboration and partnerships. So when we talk about the circular economy, we're talking about a complete cultural shift. We cannot do a cultural shift in a vacuum. We need collaboration. We need partnerships. One thing that we're working to become part of is the Washtenaw Regional Resource Management Authority. It's 7 communities in Washtenaw County. They work together to align on messaging, to leverage their combined energies. We are also working with Washtenaw County. We're part of their Plan Implementation Advisory Committee for their solid waste plan. So they ask for our input on how to help implement their solid waste plan. As Kayla mentioned, we have contracts with Recycle Ann Arbor for curbside residential recycling. We work with We Care Denali for composting. Just south of the city is our compost facility. A lot of municipalities don't have a compost facility that close. And working with the Ecology Center, as Kayla has said. In the future, we'd really like to leverage the A20 Partners Network in regards to the circular economy. We'd also like to work with Spark and Washtenaw Community College to incubate circular economy businesses. We want to work with NEW to incubate circular economy nonprofits. District 2030, if you don't know what they are an organization that aims to reduce emissions and water usage in buildings. We could potentially work with them to work on waste within buildings. We're working with Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy. That's a Michigan department at the state level. They have a materials marketplace. This is a place, if you're an organization or a municipality or a business, you can go here and you can buy and you can sell goods. So it's like a reuse marketplace. When I talk about collaboration, we're going to need to work with industry groups. Even though we may traditionally see them as the enemy or the opposition, we feel we really need to work together. So for instance, the Recycling Partnership is an organization of a lot of very large plastics producers, but they're really working to improve recycling in the United States. So they fund things like recycling carts for municipalities and tagging programs to improve the contamination rate in the recycling. The Product Stewardship Institute, they're working on extended producer responsibility legislation. This is the idea where the manufacturer is responsible for the good at the end of its life, rather than the consumer or the municipality. We're also working with ICLEI, which is Local Units of Government for Sustainability. In fact, we are part of their Circle City Scan Tool Pilot 2.0. So in this pilot, we're looking at the goods and services coming into the city of Ann Arbor and those going out, and helping to focus on what will have the most impact on the circular economy. So there was only 4 cities that they asked to participate in this. It was Denver, Colorado, Cupertino, California, Maui City, Hawaii, and the city of Ann Arbor. And then we're also part of the Urban Sustainability Directors Network. Funding is always an issue. What do we have right now? We have the Sustaining Ann Arbor Together grants. This is up to $10,000 available to an organization that's working on some kind of sustainability initiative in the city. In the future, we want to keep promoting those grants. We'd also like to do a holistic assessment of what kind of funding is out there. For instance, can we use city funding to leverage industry grants or foundational funds? What does that framework really look like? What have we done? We've recently applied for an Eagle infrastructure grant. So our drop-off station, where we accept recycling that is not accepted curbside, it's located on a landfill. And the landfill is sinking, but it's not all sinking at the same rate. So our building is kind of doing something like this. So we would like to move that building to a more stable location and to expand the services that are offered there. And we're doing that in collaboration with Recycle Ann Arbor and Washtenaw County. As I said, the recycling partnership has this tagging program. I think we've applied for a grant to be part of that. We're also working on this next cycle. This is an initiative put out by the state of Michigan. It's based on a Colorado model, but ours is more innovative and has more challenge tracks. And we have applied for quite a few grants. So raise your hand if you're familiar with the reusable takeout container pilot. Few of you. So the city of Ann Arbor started this pilot where there's, I think, 3 participating restaurants that have reusable takeout containers for their food. And we have done a first phase, and now we're looking at phase 2. So we applied for a grant out of the Micros track. We've also applied for a grant for our metrics creation. We want to, our current metrics around resource management focus on end of life, composting, recycling versus trash. And what we really want to start looking at is how do we elevate what's being done regarding reuse, regarding repair, regarding refurbishment? What are our local businesses doing? How can we measure that, inventory it, and then promote it? So we've applied for a grant for that. We're also a stakeholder in the urban wood reuse program. So this was a flows track, which has to do around organics management. And it's really trying to find a way to create markets for urban wood. And we've been asked to be a stakeholder there. Infrastructure, I mentioned before, we have the drop-off station, the compost facility, the materials recovery facility is being refurbished and I think is about ready to open. I believe they're going to have their official launch on Earth Day 2022. We work with the county on the household hazardous waste. And again, there's a lot of reuse, rental, and repair facilities in the city and in the county at large. And the county has a trash to treasures guide that lists all of these types of businesses. You can see the materials recovery facilities opening. We want to do that expanded drop-off station I mentioned earlier. For those of you who don't know, our libraries rent more than just books. They rent games, they rent musical equipment, musical instruments. So we want to really promote that and like to expand that. So the idea that we don't need to buy something, instead we can just go and borrow it from the library. There's also these things called repair cafes and fix-it clinics. These are really things that can be done at the neighborhood level. So let's say I have a shirt that's ripped and I want it to get it fixed. So I could come to a repair cafe and there would be a local volunteer there who would sew my shirt while I sit there and talk with them. A fix-it clinic, I would bring the shirt and they would show me how to sew it rather than they would do it for me. So this builds resilience in the community, it builds community itself, and it helps to create more value in our goods. And then I also want to talk about the swap days. So Sister Lakes Association has done these. They've done 2 of them. The idea is you take your goods that you no longer want, but that are still in a good shape, and you put them out at the road, and people in the community can come and take them if they want. And then at the end of the day, you're responsible for bringing those things back into your own home that didn't get taken. So this is, again, a way to build resilience in community. Plans. The city of Ann Arbor has A20. For those of you who don't know, there's strategy 5, which is change the way we use, reuse, and dispose of materials. Part of that includes moving towards a circular economy. We have our latest solid waste resource management plan, also known as the SWRM. So that really built on our 2016 comprehensive organics management plan. In the future, it's going to be really important to integrate our plans. The city has lots of different plans. We're hoping A20 can kind of be a way to integrate all those plans. So for instance, when you talk about permitting, you can bring in things like materials usage. Are people buying goods that for their permits that are made from recycled materials? When you look at zoning, you can talk about prioritizing a low carbon lifestyle. Capital improvements, again, what are those materials being used? And also, what are those materials that are deconstructed? What's happening with those materials? Or when you talk about land use and regional solutions, We talk about supply chains. Local supply chains create less greenhouse gas emissions than very large global supply chains. Outreach and education. Kayla mentioned we were working with the Ecology Center. We do fairs. Galen knows about this A2 Ambassadors program. Galen started this. It brings together and trains interested people around climate change, around A2 with the idea that those members then go back out into the community and talk to the community about what they've learned. In the future, we want to continue to leverage that program. We're also potentially looking at a Green Business Challenge, which would be recognizing businesses for doing things in alignment with A2. We could look at staff awareness, staff training. We could also look at integrating circular economy and sustainability issues into school curriculums. We could work with Spark on really incubating those circular economy businesses. And in fact, we are working with Spark on that. We could also work with professional chapters to help people understand what the circular economy is. And vocational programs could be something. Do people know how to repair? Do they know how to refurbish? Policies and laws. So in 2013, the city adopted the sustainability framework. It's integrated in the city's master plan. It includes an environmentally preferred purchasing policy. This allows us to make decisions when we purchase goods on other things than just the dollar amount. And we have a commitment to power all municipal electricity by 2035 with renewables. In the future, we could talk about supporting state and federal laws, such as extended producer responsibility. In the SHWRM, we have construction and demolition debris guidance. It specifically wants to write an ordinance that would require providing information on how much demolition debris you have. And then the next set of ordinances after we collect that data would be creating landfill guidance of trying to remove that waste from the landfill. We could expand our environmental preferable purchasing policy. We could repeal the ban on bans. Currently, we can't ban single-use items. We can't ban plastic bags because the state has forbid that. Another thing we could do is require compost in city infrastructure, projects, and gardens. When we talk about programs and practices, so we're already doing this composting. And in 2013, we started accepting food scraps. That's all food scraps. According to the SHWRM, a lot of people don't know that we, in the city of Ann Arbor, don't know that we collect food scraps. And when I say that, I include meat, bones, eggs, bread. So that's something that can be shared widely and will be very beneficial. We give out free wood chips and mulch. So instead of putting those in the compost, we give them to people to use. We also have an obsolete products policy whereby things don't get thrown away. Instead, they get sold for reuse. In the future, I talked about that Green Business Challenge. We could talk about expanding our materials programs like composting, community solar, energy efficiency programs, and then working with things like Spark to incentivize recruitment of sustainable manufacturing and businesses. Social equity and inclusion. Right now, A2 is based on 3 tenets. It's equity, sustainability, and transformation. We also have a technology called Cityworks. This is a works management program. It increases transparency. So anybody who requests a service from the city, it goes into this work management program. And then it also includes when we responded and when we closed the issue. So there's transparency around who gets what. We can go back and look at that. We have an engagement toolkit. Kayla was talking about our engagement process earlier. That has a list of probably over 100 organizations that we could potentially outreach to for any project we're doing. So that really helps us to be expansive and thoughtful about who we're reaching. And then over the last 3 years, we've had some equity trainings. In the future, we could ground our work in targeted universalism. This would be to ensure that the greatest and first benefit of our circular economy would go to those who have been most negatively impacted. We could also evaluate all our actions as to their equity and justice implications. Studies, assessments, and monitoring. This is important. You know, what gets measured gets attention. So what have we currently been looking at? As I said before, we've been looking at end of life. We've been looking at waste to landfill versus waste to recycling versus waste to composting. This is called a diversion rate. We've also been looking at our recycling stream with audits, regular audits of how contaminated they are. And our contamination rate is around 10%, which is very low for any community. In the future, we'd like to do like a materials flow assessment, as I mentioned from the ICLEI pilot that we're doing. We'd like to look at all the goods and services coming into the city and those going out to help us determine where to focus. We want to move towards those front end metrics, as I mentioned. How do we inventory and measure what repair and reuse, et cetera, are doing? Technology, I said we have the Cityworks technology. The other benefit of Cityworks technology is you can schedule preventive maintenance and predictive maintenance. And when you do preventive maintenance, your goods and your things last longer. So when I get an oil change, which is preventive maintenance on my car lasts longer. When you get a checkup on your HVAC system regularly, your HVAC system lasts longer. So Cityworks makes that automated and extends the life of our goods, which means we have to purchase less goods and we're using our resources more efficiently. We have these things called big bellies. You might have seen these downtown. These are, you can touch this foot pedal down here and it opens it. And it's a trash compacting, and it's powered by solar power. And when it's compacting the trash, you're supposed to be able to realize efficiencies in your pickup schedule. It's also a platform for other 5G technology, if that's desired. In the future, we'd like to take all those businesses that in the circular economy that we've inventoried, and we'd like to put them in an app so that the average person can have access to them and they can see where they are. We'd also like to put it on a dashboard so that policymakers and commissioners can have access to them and they can see them. Again, what gets measured gets attention. Potentially expanding big belly containers, cameras in solid waste vehicles or containers to help us pinpoint contamination. And then business process innovation. This is really important. When we talk about the circular economy, we're talking not just about like repair and refurbishment, but what is the technology and the business processes that support that? So for instance, like ThreadUp is an online retailer for used clothing. There has to be a new business process to get those clothes back. You know, they go out and how do you get them back? And what is the technology that allows you to support that? So there's a lot of innovation and technology in that realm. And that's what I have as far as the presentation. I would like to open it up to kind of talk about some of this if you all feel like it. For instance, what are you doing that's circular? What about this interests you? How can we build in equity? And what can we do to support that work? If that makes sense to talk about this.
And that completes the staff presentations that we had planned. So it's really open for questions and discussion on anything that I had shared, Sarah or Jenny as well.
Okay, yeah, thanks you all. Thanks all of you. Are there any questions? Please raise your hand. Chris Graham.
I'm very impressed with this and sort of stunned about how far and how deep you've gone into how to do it. In my view, plastics are the hardest thing right now to get a grip on. In my business, I purchase nearly all plant material except bald trees in one sort or another of plastic container with one sort or another of a plastic label. I'm sure I wasn't supposed to be putting them in the recycle bins a while ago. I finally figured out I shouldn't. So they're going in the trash bin because none of the vendors from whom I buy plant materials will take them back. The presentation we had at the last meeting, I think, or one before that, from a plastics guy who was saying, well, now we have plastics that have different coatings on the inside of bottles, so they can't be recycled, and on he went. How can we, are you working with the people making plastics that we have close by? One of the big ones is Absolpure, to see what policy changes might be made in order to bring the problem into manageable scale. We don't have to have so many different kinds of plastic. Most of the plant material can go in polyethylene containers, just plain polyethylene containers, and those could be recycled eminently. I've changed from PVC pipes for drain tiles to polyethylene pipes. Even in circumstances where I used Schedule 40, the very hard wall PVC pipes, I've changed again to double wall polyethylene pipes. Just as strong, way more recyclable, way more safe to make. Forgive me for pushing on that lever, but for me to join you in being better at the circular economy, the plastics problem is acute.
Let's see, any response to that? Okay, any other questions? Yeah, raise your hand, Bob, meet him.
Not a question, just a quick comment. I appreciate all the information from all of you, and I just wanted to pick up on one nugget amongst it, but I'm really happy that we're getting to the soft launch of the year-round composting. I think that's huge and much appreciated. Congratulations and thanks to everyone who's making that happen.
That's so exciting.
Just please be patient with us. We are learning this year.
John Calloway.
Just a little follow-up on that. When you say soft launch, is it going to be citywide, or are you thinking it's going to be certain parts of the city to start? Just curious what type of scale you're going to start with.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Okay. No, it will be citywide. When I say soft launch, it's just trial and error. We know the challenge, educate everybody to, properly hold their, put their food waste in containers that won't freeze and stick to the carts. And service could be just a little slow if we get a big snow.
Thank you.
Chris, you have your hand up. You're muted. You're muted.
If you talk about a circular economy, that was awfully useful.
Sure.
And, we put a lot of stuff out on our curb and it gets picked up and people take it off, but